Wouldn't that be wonderful if you could just say, so be it?
Try.
Okay, I'm going to give you something different now. Okay, this one's a bit different, all right? High above the city on the tall column stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes he had 2 bright sapphires, and a red ruby glowed in his sword hilt. He was much admired indeed.
"He's as beautiful as a weathercock,"
remarked one of the town councillors, wishing to gain a reputation for having artistic tastes.
"Only not quite so practical,"
he added, fearing lest people should think him impractical, which he certainly was not. "Oh, why can't you be like the Happy Prince?" said a sensible mother to her child who was crying for the moon.
"The Happy Prince never dreams of crying for anything."
"Well, I'm glad to see there's someone in the world who's quite happy," muttered the disappointed man as he gazed up at the wonderful statue.
"He's as beautiful as an angel,"
said the children of charity as they came out of the cathedral in their bright scarlet cloaks and their clean white pinafores.
"How would you know?"
said the mathematical master.
"You've never seen one." "Ah, but we have, in our dreams."
And the mathematical master frowned and looked very severe, for he did not approve of children dreaming. Now one night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he'd stayed behind, for he'd fallen in love with the most beautiful reed. He'd met her early in the spring when he was flying down the river after a big yellow moth, and he'd been so attracted by her slender waist that he'd stopped to talk to her.
"Shall I love you?"
said the swallow, who liked to come to the point at once. And the reed made him a low bow. So he flew round and round her, touching the water with the tips of his wings and making beautiful silver ripples. This was his courtship, and it lasted all through the summer.
"'Tis a ridiculous attachment,"
twittered the other swallows.
"She has no money and far too many relations."
And indeed, the river was quite full of reeds. Then when autumn came, they flew away. When they had gone, he began to feel lonely, and he began to tire of his lady love.
"She has no conversation, and I fear she is quite coquette, for she is always flirting with the wind."
And indeed, whenever the wind blew, she made the most graceful curtsies.
"I will admit she is domestic, but I love travelling, and consequently my wife should love travelling also. Will you come away with me?"
he said to her finally. But the reed merely shook her head. She was so attached to her home.
"Oh, I fear you have been trifling with me. I'm off to the pyramids. Goodbye."
And so he flew away. Now he flew all through the daytime, and in the evening he came to the great city.
"Where shall I put up? I do hope the town has made preparations."
Then he saw the statue on the tall column.
"I shall put up there. It is a fine position with plenty of fresh air."
So he alighted between the feet of the Happy Prince.
"I have a golden bedroom,"
he said as he looked about himself, and he prepared to go to sleep. But before he'd tucked his head under his wing, a drop of water fell.
"Oh, what a curious thing. The stars are quite clear and bright, and there isn't a cloud in the sky. But it seems to be raining. The climate in the north of Europe is really dreadful. The reed used to like the rain, but that was merely her selfishness."
And then another drop fell.
"Oh, what is the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off? I really must find myself a good chimney pot."
And he determined to fly away. But before he'd opened up his wings, a third drop fell, and he looked up, and what did he see?
The eyes of the Happy Prince were filled with tears,
and the tears were running down his golden cheeks. And his face looked so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow flew up to talk to him.
"Who are you?"
"I am the Happy Prince."
"Why are you crying then? You have quite drenched me."
"When I was alive," said the statue, "and had a human heart, I did not know what tears were for I lived in the palace of Sanssouci, where sorrow is not allowed to enter. In the daytime I played with my companions in the garden, and in the evening I led the dance in the great hall. Around the garden ran a lofty wall. I never cared to ask what lay beyond it. Everything around me was so beautiful, my courtiers called me the Happy Prince. And happy indeed I was, if pleasure be happiness. So I lived, and so I died. And now that I am dead, they have placed me up here so high above my city that I can see all the suffering and all the misery of my people. And though my heart is made of lead, I cannot choose but weep."
"What? He's not solid gold?"
thought the little swallow to himself. He was far too polite to make any personal remarks out loud. "Far away," continued the statue, "far away across the city, in a small street there is a poorhouse. One of the windows is open, and through that window I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is all thin and worn, and her hands are all red and coarse and pricked by a needle, for she is a seamstress. She is embroidering passion flowers onto a satin gown for the most beautiful of the Queen's maids of honour to wear to the next court ball. In a bed in the corner of her room, her little boy is lying ill. He is tossing feverishly and asking for oranges, but she has only river water to give him, and he is crying. Little Swallow, will you not take her the ruby from my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal, and I cannot move.
Oh, I'm awaited for in Egypt, said the little Swallow. My friends are flying up and down the Nile and talking to the large lotus flowers. Soon they'll go to sleep in the tomb of the great king. The great king is there himself, in a painted coffin. He's wrapped in yellow linen and embalmed with spices. Around his neck hangs a chain of pale green jade, and his hands are like withered leaves.
Swallow, Swallow, little Swallow, will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? The boy is so thirsty, and the mother so sad.
Oh, I don't think I like little boys. Last summer when I was staying down by the river, there were 2 rude boys, the miller's sons. They were always throwing stones at me. They never hit me, of course. We swallows fly far too well for that, and besides, I come from a family famous for its agility. But still, it was a mark of disrespect.
But the happy prince looked so sad that the little Swallow was sorry.
Oh, I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger.
So he plucked the ruby from the prince's sword hilt and flew with it in his beak over the roofs of the city. He passed by the cathedral where the white marble angels are sculpted, and he passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. A beautiful woman came out onto the balcony with her lover. "How wonderful the stars are," he said to her, "and how wonderful is the power of love." He passed by the harbour and saw the lanterns hanging to the masts of the ships, and then he passed by the ghetto and saw the old Jews bargaining with one another and weighing out money in copper scales. And then at last he came to the poorhouse and looked in. The woman had fallen asleep, she was so tired, so in he hopped and placed the ruby by the woman's thimble on the table. And then he flew round and around the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings.
"How cool I feel," said the little boy. "I must be getting better."
And he sunk into a delicious slumber. And then the little Swallow flew back to the prince to tell him what he had done.
"'Tis a curious thing, but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold."
"That is because you have done a good action," said the prince. Then the little Swallow began to think, and then he fell asleep. Thinking always made him sleepy.
Yeah, the same problem.
The next day, he went down to the river to have a bath.
"What a remarkable phenomenon,"
Said the professor of ornithology as he was passing over the bridge.
"A swallow in winter."
And he wrote a long letter about it to the local newspaper. Everyone quoted it. It was full of so many words they couldn't understand.
"I'm going to Egypt,"
Cried the Swallow, and he was in high spirits at the prospect. He visited all the public monuments and spent a long time on top of the church steeple, and wherever he went, all the sparrows chirruped.
said, "What a distinguished stranger."
So he enjoyed himself very much. And then when the moon rose, he flew back to the prince.
"Any commissions for Egypt? I'm just starting out."
Swallow, Swallow, little Swallow, will you not stay with me for one night longer?
"Oh, I'm awaited for in Egypt. Tomorrow my friends will fly up to the second cataract. There the river horse couches amongst the bulrushes, and on a great granite throne sits the god Memnon. All night long he watches the stars, and when the morning star appears, he utters one cry of joy, and then he is silent.